call this meeting to order. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll start with comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on to amendments to the agenda.
Number 5 is coming off.
Okay. All right, we're going to delete agenda item number 5 for action at another date.
Mm-hmm.
And anything else, David?
No.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to the city school collaboration update.
So as most of you know, Elizabeth and I continue to meet with both chair of the city council and the city manager, although this last time Pam was unable to meet with us, so it was both Elizabeth and I meeting with Kevin. And again, we continued some positive discussions around future planning in the city/school, and some ideas around master planning and visioning was a topic that I think you'll hear more about. In addition, also a desire for a legislative breakfast to be coming up on December 17th at 7:30 in the morning. And you can maybe just make note of that, although I've seen some, or I've had some feedback that it might not be a working time for folks. So other than that, I think we're open and listening and doing well with city and school relationships. So that's all I have.
Yeah, and that legislative breakfast is scheduled at City Hall at 7:30 in the morning. But as David said, some of the early feedback from legislators they're not available. So I'm anticipating that date may change at this point. December 17th.
Correct.
In the morning at City Hall. Yeah.
You can just hold that, but we'll be back, and I'll be back in touch with you. I think there's likely, as Elizabeth said, like to be a different date.
Yeah. And I think, just if I can add a little bit, David and Kevin have done a really nice job prioritizing some of the work that came out of the initial steering committee between the city council and school board. And the focus is really going to be on the master planning side of it, because as city center develops, really the district wants to be in a position to kind of be in lockstep with identifying needs of the district and coordinating any priorities that the city might have relative to master planning. So David and Kevin are going to spearhead that, and I think at our next steering committee meeting in January we'll get an update on that.
Correct.
Great. Thanks, David.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item number 7, response to the environmental court decision on Howard Center's methadone clinic on Dorset Street. Do you want to give us an update from our attorney?
So again, our attorney has responded back to us as far as what are the options for the board regarding, as you all know, the environmental court ruled and certainly did not support our position, and our attorney Pietro Lynn has provided you with information about the next step would be to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. He's provided you with some general cost estimates, and at this point it's really in your hands, board, to determine what you wish to do next regarding this current appeal with the Howard Center.
And I think specifically the incremental cost is in that 5,000 range.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do we have any discussion from the board on thoughts at this point?
Can you tell about the time period that would take in terms of?
Again, a little hard to be really specific about that. Again, Pietro provided that there's some months that are involved here, somewhere in the period of about a 9-month plan or process by which you might get some feedback. Again, that's a general rule. So it would be a 9-month process once the Supreme Court hears both sides. So it would put you in that kind of time frame.
So let me make a motion. We can discuss afterwards if there's more. So I'd like to move that the district proceed to appeal the decision of the Vermont Environmental Court regarding the location of the methadone clinic in proximity to the district schools.
I'll second that motion.
Do we have discussion on the motion?
I mean, I think it's important to make this motion, to proceed with the appeal. We've been doing our due diligence with respect to the methadone clinic since we started hearing about it a year and a half ago? And I think we should take it the next step, particularly since the incremental cost is quite low for the school district. And the reason for that is most of our arguments have already been framed, and there's not as much work for our attorneys to do to put it in front of the Supreme Court. So I think we take it to the next step. I do believe that we owe it to our students and to the faculty to fight this as far as we need to. So,
any other comments? Yeah, I think I would add that when this process started, the district was interested in doing its due diligence relative to the location of the methadone clinic in such close proximity to the schools, and our charge is really the safety of our students and our staff. And I think when we were open to be persuaded throughout this process that there were not incremental safety issues or risks to our students and staff, and we have not been persuaded yet of that. So it is a legal option to pursue this by taking it to the Vermont Supreme Court and taking the appeal there at a modest incremental cost. So that said, we respect the service that the Howard Center delivers to the patients that require it. And we also, I think, feel a need to preserve the safety of our students and staff by pursuing this. So we have a motion and we have a second to take the appeal to the Supreme Court. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and the motion passes. David, would you let Pietro Lynn know that we are going to pursue this?
I will.
Through the next appeal process.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Thank you all. All right, on to agenda item 8, student representative report. Sabina and Nirja.
So students are getting really busy this time of the year because winter sports are starting. So we have a lot of winter sports like dance team, track, basketball, so that's really exciting. We also have the new online newspaper called Revolution. If you want to talk about that, Sabina.
So that came out, I mentioned it at the last meeting, and it's kind of interesting. There was an article, an opinion piece about the methadone clinic.
I did read that. It was a good piece. I don't agree with it, but it was a good piece.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I think they're going to have their next issue in December. I think it's a monthly thing. And then we have the student forum coming up on the 17th of this month, and that's basically each grade sends, well, the freshmen and sophomores send representatives from their advisories, and the juniors and seniors come as they wish, and each grade comes up with a list of things they want to see done in the school, and then the student council takes that and creates a more narrow list, and then we go to Mr. Burke, and then we try to create subcommittees and implement those ideas.
And Sabina, I didn't hear, is the online newspaper on the district website?
I believe so. I think it's on the high school website.
High school website, okay, thank you.
How was the blood drive?
Really good. Oh, I didn't think to mention that. It was our highest amount of blood we've had since 1985. We had 59 pints.
Wow.
So
Great
they were really excited. We met the goal by an extra pint.
102% precisely.
Wow.
So
Good job.
Great.
that was really exciting.
Good, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, if nothing else, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
So I have just 2 items on here. One is the update with my meeting that happened actually quite a bit ago on October 22nd. It's hard to believe we're here in December, but I did meet with 2 representatives at Camp Johnson, representing the Air Guard. And, at this point, of course, I did not know that what the decision was going to be. So I have in here, if approved, the F-35s would be based in Burlington in 2020. We talked a lot more than what my notes really indicate, but we talked a lot about, annoyance and noise mitigation processes and what's currently in play. The current plan is to continue a very similar training regiment that they have now. It's a 3-minute in the morning and the 3-minute in the afternoon takeoff landing schedule. It's a little bit less time as a result of additional training time and simulators. But again, I think the annoyance factor is still in play there for relatively the same period of time. They recognize that. They did go over in more detail with me about some of their decisions around takeoff and departing traffic and where they turn as a result of where the engines are pointed, et cetera, and how they've worked to do that based on the new aircraft. They're open to further conversations, and that's really kind of what they led to me with. Obviously, they're certainly guided by a very specific training regiment, as I said earlier, but they're certainly open to, working with us in ways that may be helpful. Again, and there may be an ability to tweak some time if a certain time of that activity could be delayed a little bit. I think it's possible. So again, they were very happy to meet with me. I did not expect both individuals to meet with me, but both two individuals were there. Both high-ranking officers were there to meet with me. So again, I don't know if you have any specific questions. And I think more to follow really around now the implementation of the F-35.
I would like to encourage you, David, for a future discussion to invite, as many folks from the Guard and possibly the airport as well for a visit to Chamberlain School.
Okay.
So I think just that on-site visit can be very helpful in terms of them understanding the needs of the school and our students there.
I'm happy to do that and see if that can work and let you know. Great. So you can also be there as well.
That'd be great.
I think we also have on our future agenda items the issue of noise at Chamberlain School and gathering information from parents and teachers. So I think that
maybe
fits
can be combined
right in with that.
Yep. So the other one is just the update on the RFP for the audit of teacher performance. And so the due date was yesterday, and actually I don't know if, I didn't check mail today on whether or not there was a postmark that came in, but we've received 0 today. So I need to kind of, recollect and rethink and perhaps, redistribute to a larger area. Again, I haven't really put much thought. I was hopeful to receive some, and we've not. I don't know if anything come in, John, that you know of at the end of the day.
Occasionally a postmark will hit a day late, but
yeah.
That's not what we asked for either.
So again, today was yesterday was really the deadline. I need to get back on a plan and figure out. I'll keep you posted on where I go next, more broadly. Posting specific individuals maybe that I think may be interested in doing this type of work and have them obviously still respond. I have to figure out what next to do. So again, Elizabeth asked for a little update, and it was on my report. So I don't know if you have any specific questions.
So will this stay on our, I hate to lose it, do you know what I mean?
Well, it's not going to go away. It's
Okay.
an obligation that the board has directed me to do. So I'm not, it's not going to go away. I think as we look at our 18th agenda, that would be a good time, I think, for a status check on that. Either in my report or whatever. We should not lose it. Yeah, certainly if something happens to me, we should make sure it's on there. It's good.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Good. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 10, administrative reports.
So we are into, as you all know, the budget process, and you have a fair amount of information, and I hope we can be consistent around our communication. So this is really the kickoff of administrative reports and some budget discussions, and let me just take a couple minutes, and then between John and I, will walk you through some of the information. I know there's likely to be a lot of just discussion and questions about what the data represents before you get into more of the meat. But, I just want to some of my thinking, if you just bear with me for a second. As the board knows, the challenges of developing a budget that works to meet the varying needs of our school community remain important yet difficult. I have a desire, along with the administrators, teachers, staff, and I know the board, to provide students with the needed opportunities to successfully meet our ends. I have an aspiration, and I think a lot of you have heard about this, to look at creating additional relevant opportunities for students by connecting them with our business partners, where students can benefit from relevant experiences, as does the benefit to our business partners in learning about their current employees. Over the past 2 years, you've heard, not quite 2 years, but you've heard me, along with the administrators, discuss our visits to many area businesses. We have found these discussions and dialogue extremely positive for us and for them. Discussions of possible opportunities are continuing and ongoing. In addition to these culminating experiences for our students, I also feel the need to be proactive in ways that welcome our children into our South Burlington public school system. Our children most regularly enter our system at age 5, as you all know, yet brain science informs us that the most rapid time of brain development is during the 0 to 3. Our Growing Kids South Burlington program that you have certainly known about, although it's continuing now in the 4th year, has been an important service to ensure our children receiving correct responses as they pass through the preschool years. That said, we still often find ourselves in a reactive place. I feel the need to discuss a more proactive and radical model that begins pre-birth, whereby creating relationships with trusted providers that could, and I believe will, have a profound effect on our children's future on so many fronts. I have been engaged in these conversations with Growing Kids South Burlington staff and other interested staff, both within the district and outside the district, to see if possible changes could emerge. The business partnership, along with this pre-birth incentive, is what I'm essentially referring to as bookend initiatives. And so I want to just make sure you're aware of kind of that information and that direction that I have. Obviously, within the bookends is the ongoing work. The concerns, the challenges, the recommendations, and the opportunities are upon us. Currently, right now, concerns and challenges. We have 3 union contracts in negotiations. We have uninsured employees currently right now that are in the excess of the 30-hour arena that is required by the ACA that need to receive insurance. We have IT, information technology needs due to increased services. We have aging facilities, nutritional service deficit. We have a mentoring program that needs to be embedded, I believe, into the general fund. 504 coordination needs we have as a result of some changing population. ELL needs throughout the district. Behavioral assistance is needed in K-5. We have a pension fund, as you know, issue. Some of the recommendation and opportunities that I feel are out there, taking advantage of the dual enrollment offerings at the high school, what's offered and available, aligning our schedule, our high school schedule with other high schools in the area, the preparation for a 5th grade move to the middle school, establishing a capital reserve fund, master planning and visioning, as I mentioned earlier. So again, that's just a quick highlight. Again, I don't want to overwhelm you with that, but again, those are some of my thinking currently around where we are. We're going to now dive into some of the intricate details of the budget. And as you already know from your packet, you've received information that's come from the state around kind of implications and consequences that are facing us now. So we'll walk you through that. So in your packet, one of the things, and this is the Mary Peterson, and John did a nice job summarizing that the existing financial mechanism. It's this sheet that also had our budget worksheets that you're all very familiar with on those.
Which packet is that in?
It should be at your place, actually. And again, it's the budget worksheet 1. we talked about this one already. I just want to
Okay.
make sure you have that. And then, in addition, we have the future year projections through 2020, and John has numbered these as well, 1 through 6. So this also has some information on, again, breaking down the 98.8% of the budget and where money comes from. And so you'll see in here, equalized pupils is the most recent addition to this. That's new information. It's under number 1, the state education fund factors. The very last sentence of number 1 there has the preliminary number as of 12/4/13. Our equalized pupils has gone down slightly, 11 students, correct, John? Is it 11? 15. 15 students. We thought 22, and again, this is slightly better than that. And then, so I'm just walking you through the packet. I know we're moving fast. And then the last packet, which is has a financial needs, facility needs, and it has a cover page with it. I feel like I'm really confusing you now, so I see Elizabeth is with me.
Well, I assume we're going to get
We're going to go
into
through
some
this.
depth on each of these,
Yeah.
right?
And so this is specific to facilities and also some recommendations on how maybe we work to fund that. So we'll go through those. So let me just pause for a second and ask what would be most helpful. First, again, you had the Mary Peterson information. John summarized that.
At the risk of stating the obvious, as you went through that, David, I wanted to say, other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
If the board is okay with that, I think if we can start with the summary of the tax rate letter, because that was the first piece of information that we got from the state that is kind of becoming the basis off of which we're going to develop our ground floor budget. So, John or David, if we could maybe start with that.
It's fine. John, why don't you go ahead?
There's a lot of information in those letters, and there's a lot of learning in there. And last year we went through what all the funds were that make up the general ed and besides property taxes. But this year I just wanted to summarize the relevant facts that will pertain to us. And I think that the equalized pupil count is down 0.6% statewide, and ours is down 15. So we're down not quite proportionally, but we kind of figured we'd be down about 22 kids. So we're in that ballpark right now. And that's a preliminary number, by the way. We just received, David just said today. So.
And just to put that in percentages, you said the state is down by 0.6%?
Yes.
And so SB's percent is?
We're down about 0.4%.
0.4%,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think the most surprising thing to me, based on information we received from the Agency of Education, is the base education amount actually went down. It's based on a New England Economic Producers Index, which Jeffrey Carr, if you go to his website, talks a lot about the NEEP index. And that's not the CPI, but so the base education amount, of which a lot of the calculations are based, is down $42. And we had thought, based on past information, it might go up $200 or $300. So that's significant toward our tax rate. Putting pressure on our tax rate.
Now, that's inconsistent with what I've heard about general inflation rate, like being in the kind of 1% range. Is there some reason this particular NEEP index is used?
You know, it was set aside many years ago with Act 60 and Act 68 as the index to use, but beyond that, I'm not sure why it's used as instead of CPI.
Okay, so the state, I mean, they're not going to consider, there's not an opportunity to consider a different inflation index?
No,
It's- okay.
that's pretty much set in stone right
Okay.
now. It's been the same NEAP index for a long time. The next thing is that the assumption, the Agency of Education finance people advise the legislative group and the tax department about what they're hearing about spending increases, and they think that spending will increase 3.8%. And the point I just want to bring there is that's the draw from the ed fund. Our spending could be up 5%, but if you have local revenues to offset that, your draw from the ed fund might be less or more. So that's when you see something from Agency of Education or the tax commissioner, it's always talking about the context of that state education fund and not necessarily actual spending.
So all the inputs have already been decremented down for whatever that revenue was anticipated to be.
Exactly, yeah.
Could you say that again, Dan? I'm trying to...
I think what John is saying is there's a gross spending level, and then there are many, many sources of revenue that don't come from the state that bring that number down. And it's that number, which I call the net number, that's used for the state purposes.
That's right.
If I'm saying that right. And it's that number that they're talking, that last number that they're talking about going up by 3.8%. So what John's saying is that should you have an unusual source of revenue, such as we did a couple of years ago with the federal stuff, you can decrement it down more. Or should those go away, then there's less that's going to come back. But supposedly it's been netted to the end here, so
Right.
with everybody's best judgment for 1 year.
So how much gets put into that calculation as far as how the increases last year in school budgets? I mean, how do they look at the actual school budgets for that, or is it not? Do they not look at that?
They
very
don't,
much?
because that's all.
Or
It's
projected?
all they kind of know what that is by town meeting day, so that's all gets adjusted to last year. And that's why the legislature could make an adjustment in May for this current year on the tax rate, because they knew where all the budgets had come in, or essentially all the budgets.
Right.
But they're gathering information to verify this 3.8 now.
So, but is the 3.8, is that what the estimated increase in school budgets is, or just the increase in the draw?
In the
which
draw
is
from the ed fund.
Weirdly some.
Does that draw, I think what you're asking, Martin, does that draw translate into a % school budget increase? Is there any kind of proxy that draw has?
That's the driver on cost per pupil and equalized pupil. I think if we look at page 3, it illustrates what we're talking about there. The way you see on page 3, it has the proposed budget or the 14 budget of $42,986,000. And then we show the next column, the effect of the projected FY15 rates on the 14 tax rate. So we didn't change spending. This is not our budget, obviously, but it's just to keep that whole. But what I did was I adjust the local revenues down by $1,306,084 to get to the point where our Act 68 expenses are 3.8% higher. To see, and that's the draw from the ed fund is 3.8% higher, not our total spending. That's the point.
So what this is showing is at a flat prior year budget, if you adjust the draw, the SB residential tax rate would go to 1.63?
Yes, it would. Up 14 and almost 14.6 cents.
Can you say that again, Elizabeth, what you just said?
At a flat prior rate budget.
Well, I'm looking at a flat prior year budget in aggregate. That's the 42,986 at the top line.
Right.
And then John has adjusted the spending, or the draw at 3.8%.
That's
Yes.
the 1,000,003.
Yeah. So, and you've kept equalized pupils the same as well.
I did.
Okay.
I didn't know any different at this point, right?
But if you drop it down to the SB tax rate implications, it goes from, the FY14 was 1.48, it goes to 1.63.
And I have to make sure I understand. So by dropping the 1.3, are you saying that, I'm trying to understand the implications for this year's budget. I mean, are you saying that we would have a budget of $1.3 million more, or we're going to have less revenue from the state of $1.3 million in the coming year?
Basically, all this is trying to do is to say, one, that the new tax rates that the commissioner put out last week are applied to last year, just for example.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And then the second thing is illustrate if our draw from the ed fund was 3.8% more than last year, what would our tax rate have been?
Okay.
It's just kind of a what if.
Okay. So we don't know if what this, but that draw of 3.8% would be equivalent of having a budget 3.8% higher.
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
it's just, yeah, I
one
mean,
way or
it's-
the other net.
Right.
Down through.
And
Okay.
that shows up in the Act 68 expenses, right?
Right.
Local revenue.
With equivalent local revenue, okay, but that, so I can read that also as if we have the 3.8% higher budget this year. This
Yes,
is
I
the
mean, you
effect.
could do that and keep revenues the same.
Okay.
It's just one way of showing it.
And, you know, this is maybe off topic, but it's just a frustration that I'm just gonna get off my chest right now. That I mean, well, you can answer this. I mean, is part of the reason that we're seeing this is because last year, statewide, there was an average of what, 3.5%, 4% growth in budgets? I mean, is this kind of the result of that? And what I'm releasing steam on that is that we managed to keep a 2.09% increase, and we were seeing all the districts around us. You know, they have different needs, and I understand that. You know, I'm not griping at that, but they had increases of 4 or 5% and sometimes even higher, and now we're going to suffer that.
So
you know,
there's no
but from
benefit
that.
to us from.
There was no benefit to us doing
Right.
2.09%, and I mean, there is.
Well-
There is, but the fact that the many other communities did not hold budgets last year is now coming back to bite us as well. Is
Now,
that
part of
really?
it,
Am I missing?
that's part of it, but the state education fund, and if you look at the Peterson letter, there's a number of factors that feed it. It's not only tax dollars drawn by the districts, but it's also the state grand list has gone down 0.5%. And that's big because it's statewide.
Sure.
There are $7.9 million more dollars allocated for income sensitivity than last year.
Okay.
So there are other factors besides spending.
Gotcha.
But I think our work over the years has helped the ed fund, you know, being conservative. Last year.
Yeah, we're being good stewards, but we're not, well, I don't know if, I'm sure that the other districts are being good stewards as well. They have different kinds of needs and different issues.
Yeah.
But the fact is that we are tied to the state and what happens at other districts, including perhaps small schools that perhaps if they made the right decision, well, in my view, to consolidate, that, you know, there's cost savings perhaps throughout the state that aren't being taken advantage of, that is affecting what we're doing here.
Exactly.
Not the most elegant way of putting that, but I was, you know.
Uh,
All right.
Go with economies of scale.
Yeah.
If you go back to page 2, though, I think this is the most telling fact here, that the 5-cent increase in the Vermont residential rate translates into an 8.8% increase for the district without changing spending, with no other factor changed besides the new residential rate and the base education amount going down, those two, I mean. So if we have the same budget as last year, we need to ask the taxpayers for 8.8 cents more.
So without cutting our current budget, we will still be looking at an 8.8 cent or 8.6 cent increase.
It's actually the second line, Elizabeth, because you have to take into account the CLA, yes.
I'm sorry, is that percentage or cents?
That's cents, the
Okay.
change, and the percentage is in that little number, 5.8.
It's a
The 5.8.
total increase.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's really twice last year, correct? approximately?
Last year, we ended up with a 7.5 cent tax increase.
What was percentage?
It was 8%. No,
No.
I thought it
Oh,
was
yeah.
close to 10.
It was 2 point.
Oh, heck, I have that, sorry.
No, that's the budget. That was-
7.5, I'm sorry.
We used
I
8.
I know this
essentially,
number's
is what we used.
7.5% increase in percent, and it's like 10 cents on the
Okay,
tax rate.
so it's about 80% of what we asked for last year.
Right,
Without cuts.
without cuts, without any ads for health premiums or anything
Yeah,
like that.
okay.
Now, the work that Mary Peterson has done is a recommendation, correct, John? I mean, that will,
It is,
that
that's
will get
what,
voted on.
that's what the legislators all see now.
Right, and I mean, from my perspective, I mean, it is problematic that, I know that there's applications of all kinds of indices that get applied to it, but it is problematic to me that at the same time they're expecting increases, they're making a reduction, you know, to the base education amount is problematic to me.
And it is part of this as well that the state essentially did not fully fund from the general fund a couple of years ago, $30 million or some amount that they usually put, I mean, they didn't transfer as much from the general fund to the education fund.
I was talking with Stuart about that today, that the base education amount was held constant for 3 years, yes.
Right.
In a effort to try to control spending at the local level. It got back to statutory level last year for the first time in 4 years. So there was an effect in spending in the districts for a couple of those years actually was pretty, didn't increase as much as it is now, I guess I should say.
But you could argue that was the same effect of the federal ERA funds, right?
That's true.
You actually gave a good summary, John, of, I think this spending up, grand list down, income sensitivity up. Those were 3 big variables
Yes.
that are driving the total picture, correct?
Right.
I mean, I think the other, you know, income sensitivity is a topic of discussion as well. I mean, I think it's an important one. We want to make sure we're sensitive to those that are income fragile. But there's a pretty significant increase associated with that, that obviously has an effect on us too. And I also challenge a little bit of the thinking around that.
Well, I think that has to do with the overall income that's being realized in Vermont.
Yeah,
Yes.
again, yeah, it is, but I think it puts more pressure. You know, what we're doing puts more pressure to put more people into that, right?
Puts more pressure.
That's right, and so,
And I mean, and I think
It's
it's
a
just a general
double
theme
negative.
that the state is trying to make it harder and harder to increase school spending.
yeah.
I mean, everything I read says the viewpoints are too much is being spent for education.
Yeah.
And expenses are determined at the school board level.
There was a lot of discussion about the equity between homestead and non-residential rates and the voice of people who own businesses or own apartment buildings and don't vote in that city and how that affects business. And that was 4 or 5 pages. That's, you could read, I think, and get some learning about that. So anyway, I just thought that a nickel on the base homestead rate and the non-homestead rate a nickel is the recommendation from the commissioner. And I'm very thankful that we got the letter at 4 o'clock on Tuesday, so that by statute it was due on December 1st, which would have been Sunday. So I got to think about this weekend. So all the other business managers too.
So is there, I mean, this is something perhaps we should think about, or mainly John can think about, because he knows. Is there a particular message that we want to go to our legislators with, rather than saying all this is just screwy? I mean, you're giving us more things to do here at the local level. We've done very well the last few years, and yet you're coming back to us with this, rather than that, although that's what I'd like to say. Right. I mean, is there something that could be more focused? Like, should we focus on what's the one that would help us the most, that we might be able to focus on and have a good argument to go to our legislators with? I mean, I'm not, if you have an answer right now, that's great,
Well,
but
I mean,
if not.
I have a thought, and I don't know from a policy standpoint how it would sit, but the income sensitivity adjustment, a person under the state financing system only is supposed to pay X amount of their household income for school taxes. And so that's one reason when household incomes decline, which is what this is saying, there has to be more money toward that income sensitivity. And in hard times, that shifts the burden, and I think it's how it's supposed to work in a progressive manner to people who can afford it more.
Yeah.
But it does. It's part of this increase.
Well,
just to think about, are the limits right? Or
That's right.
That one's a tougher one to.
I know,
I was
it's very
hoping
tough.
a different,
I mean,
a different one than that, because that one's a little harder to argue than other elements of what is in here.
I mean, there's the other side of things which affect us too. Is it's pretty common knowledge that the teacher retirement fund is looking. Beth Pierce, the treasurer, is asking for another $20 million to fund post-employment health benefits.
So that, I mean, that,
And so that
does
could be-
bite us somewhat. You know, I mean, we keep on pushing that off and not having to worry presumably at the local level, but we really do, because that's money that might otherwise come from the general fund or whatever to help us with the education expenses.
That's right, and I was at a meeting with New York State business managers, and they all have that in there locally, or fund that, so.
The teacher's retirement is funded local?
Yes. So it's.
It just seems like we should send, we've been relatively passive vis-a-vis our legislators since I've been on the board. And it seems this year, you know, particularly since we really held the line last year, and have actually for the last few years, that we should speak up a little bit more, I would think.
Maybe
But we have to figure out the
meet
message,
with
though.
our legislatures, you know, on our own, or invite them to one of our budget hearings, because I think sometimes, although I know it's important for the city to have the message about our budget as well, I mean, maybe we need undivided attention from our legislatures about this issue.
Well, this was certainly the major topic for the December 17th meeting, but in the event that doesn't happen, I do think at a minimum we should extend an invitation to the next board meeting to the legislators on the budget and consider maybe a separate special meeting that we could have that discussion.
We've done that, as Martin said, we've had our legislative breakfast, and we've shared, I'd say, more organized as time has gone on our issues, and we've given them and we've asked for feedback.
But I think we're going to have to explain, if we're going to do that, I think we're going to have to explain why we're asking for what we're asking for and what the effect of it is. And at least the way I look at it is, the place you have to start is either with a level budget year to year, or what I would prefer to see is a level per pupil spending year to year, because I think one of the knocks that school districts get is they're not being responsive to a declining student population, and that would accommodate that concern. And then say, okay, if we do that, we have all these incremental costs that we've picked up through contract negotiations, through cost of doing business, or whatever it is, and here's a bunch of stuff that has to get done a different way. And about the only lever that we really have is to decrease the staff that's being employed. Everything else is pretty ineffective. We're about 82% of personnel costs right now. So 8 cents out of every dollar that's there is got to come out of personnel if you want to keep the ratios constant. And it's not clear that you can always keep the ratios constant. I mean, I've watched this budget develop now for 5 or 6 years, and my perception is that these guys have done, staff's done a yeoman job in holding the line on non-personnel costs. But we've got a bunch of things that are coming that are going to have to get done. We've got turf field to replace, we've got track to replace. We've got a couple other big things in here associated with ADA that have been described. Elevators that don't meet standards, access points that aren't right. So we're gonna, and some of these things are mandated. We don't really have long-term options on them. I mean, at some point in time, we have to be responsive, or else we're taking on a burden and exposure that we ought to really at least understand what it is. So let me say that again. If we're going to go to the legislature and ask for something, we should have a bill with it that says this is what it's going to cost us. And it's going to cost us a reduction in staff of, I don't know what it would be, as a possible example. You know, it's going to be profound if the measures, if the baselines are constant, either constant budget, which, by the way, we already found out is going to have a big tax increase of 6%, which is, you know, that on top of 8% last year. That's 15% over 2 years.
Yeah.
I think that's not going to happen for a long time. I mean, continued for a long time. So if we're going to do that, I think we've got to get that homework together. And if that's what we want to do, then that's kind of like an urgent thing, because in the absence of understanding where things are going, we're going to either be selling a very big tax increase, or we're going to be making some substantial cuts in something.
Well, I think it's critical that we do that. We do this work, and you know, last year, as you know, we had some, you know, softer topics, but you know, we had security, we had criminal records and background checks. We had on there, which was a big one, and we did do the costs associated with, you know, Act 129 and choice, and we put some specific metrics with that said, you know, the change in this represents significance to us. We can resurface that one. We can think more specifically about some of the specific components that are going to affect us with a bill amount or a change amount, and you know, we can certainly do that. Maybe a board member or two would be willing to work with myself and John on, you know, just culling that out. Again, I don't think it needs to be a lot of items. In some ways, maybe it's no more than three, you know, and this is it. We'll work on the others in a different way.
Yeah,
but,
you go after the big ticket thing.
right, and we really want to get them. If we can only get 2 or 3 at a time, then we'll do that as well. But
yeah.
Okay. So,
Hey, can I take a minute? I want to invite our students into this conversation. Sometimes the numbers get a little bit dry, but I'm not sure if you're looking at some of these schedules. I'd be not so much interested in your feedback right now, but I want to ask you to think about, right now what we're showing is that South Burlington is paying, and do I use the Act 68 number here per pupil cost?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's $14,435 to educate a student in a year within South Burlington.
Actually, it's more like 18,000 something.
That's true. Yeah. So I don't know if you guys ever think about that in terms of, I'm sure you're looking, Sabina, at colleges and things like that, and maybe buying a new car or something, but I'd like you to think about the value received for a public education in South Burlington when you know that residents are paying for each of you and for all your friends and classmates upwards of $15,000 a year. And I know that that's not something we've always included a student perspective in, but you know, what we're delivering is a quality public education, and figuring out how to do that in a way that taxpayers can afford it, and it's a desirable outcome. We obviously want students to prosper in our community and come back when you're out of college and work in the community and raise your families here and so forth. But I hope that sounds like as big a number to you as it does to each of us when we're asking taxpayers to spend that kind of money. So I don't know if you may think about it and come back with some questions, but sometimes the numbers get a little bit dry, and I just wanted to bring it home a little bit for each of you.
Yeah. Thank you.
The other question I have, which is really for my edification, we have a fair number of tuition students. How do they factor into our per pupil spending rate?
At the state level, the revenue that we receive is a credit. It's counted as a local revenue, and we receive payments from other districts instead of from the ed fund for those kids, for those students.
Well, we have in the past.
So it shows,
We still do for.
We still do for the current
Students that don't have a high school, or communities that don't have a high school.
Oh, right, for Georgia and,
Right.
yeah.
But those districts get their funding from the ed fund.
They do,
They get the AD the ed fund draw.
So it's a
It counts
redeployment
80.
of the draw to this receiving district.
That's right.
well, my concern is that if we look at a per pupil spending metric, which a lot of people would like to have the thing looked at, it's important that you know what you spend, which I think we know pretty well. But it's also important to know what number of students you're dividing it by and how you got that number. So if you, then there's about, if my numbers are right here, there's about 120 total tuition students of various ilk around, okay? I guess mostly in a high school, if I understand everything correctly. So that's a fairly significant part of our population. It's, I don't know what it is, but it's 120, 2,200s roughly, okay? I mean, it gets to be a noticeable number, 5% or so. So, and we're talking numbers in the 5% range here. So if we don't get this number right within a 0.5% or 1/4%, when we say it's wrong. And my concern is that at the gross level, those tuition students must be included. At the net level, they may not be included. But, so the question is, is it a material difference between how we state those things and do we have it understood right? I mean, you've heard from me in various roles that I'm concerned about becoming addicted to the tuition program. That, you know, if it suddenly went away like the ARR things went away, it would be a problem for us, okay?
Well, I think when we get
A
to the
profound
revenue,
problem.
You'll see it.
the 2020 revenue projection, I fine-tuned that a little bit
Okay.
to show what did choice students going away mean and what our projection is for the kids
Yeah.
at Georgia and Grand Isle school districts.
I'm just very concerned with the system that we have, that no one reports the per pupil spending the same from district to district. And so when the state tries to deal with it, they're getting a bunch of numbers that aren't the same number. I mean, you know, it's like you're getting paid in euros, you're getting paid in yen, I'm getting paid in dollars, and I get 6, you get 10, and the other guy's got 9. What, you know, what do I really have? What do we really have?
But isn't the per pupil cost based on equalized pupils, and isn't that formula established?
That comes right.
Yeah, so
They-
we don't, when we look at our equalized pupils, that's not an actual number of students. So that would not include the tuition students.
I mean, I think what Dan is trying to say is,
Right, it doesn't.
on the gross level, you got how many students in your building?
Right.
You got 200 kids in your building. 150 of them are ours, and we count them in our average daily membership count.
Right.
And then 50 come from outside. We don't receive ADM, but we receive tuition.
Right.
The calculation that
we
is
incur-
rendered on the
and
per
we
pupil
incur expenses
spending,
because of
he's
the-
simply saying is different than if you have a school with 200 that's all ADM
Right.
and no tuition.
Right,
you
but the
see.
tuition is more than the ADM.
Currently, the tuition is more, and we have an announced tuition rate.
Yes.
And then we have the opportunity to go back and correct through an adjusted amount. And so, again, when I think, as John said, when we get to the projections, you'll see a little bit of that. But I mean, I think Dan's point is a valid one across the
Yeah.
state.
Yeah. It's just, for me, you know, the tuition amount, the per pupil cost amount, and then the base education amount, and trying to, you know, understand what each of those, you know, so that I can articulate it to others. And it's complicated.
I think what happens for all of you is you become, throughout the budget season, you become much more,
Yeah.
you become reacquainted and you understand, and then you have to, you know.
Refresh.
Refresh,
Yeah.
yeah. So, any other questions on that for John? Or John, anything you wanted to highlight in addition to what you already have?
No.
Okay. So I think maybe right to go to the future year projections through 2020. And this gets back to you, John, I think, just giving an overview of this, and we were talking about a piece of this as well.
We made a commitment to get our projections done for 5 years and then through 2020. And it's been a bit challenging because I sat down with a superintendent once, and we did it 5 years out in probably 2 hours. but it's a bit more challenging to document it, so someone else could do it and put down all the thinking that goes into it. So that's what this represents. And the product is on the back 2 pages we'll get to in a minute, but we do have distinct categories of revenue that come from 5 different places, and then the rest is pretty much miscellaneous. The State Education Fund last year is 80% of our budget, and that's why we're talking about the commissioner's letter and how that all works at the state level. And I'm trying to get to the point of being able to forecast that years ahead. So the first section on page 1 and 2 talks about all the factors that go into that state education fund. And we've looked at trends, and for instance, our equalized pupils on page 1 there, it looks like it's decreasing at about 0.8% per year. And that assumption is pretty good because the preliminary number came out at 2366 and the forecast was 2362. But this is a changing number, but for forecasting through 2020, I thought that was important to know that that's how we're basing our assumptions going forward.
And John, can I ask a question there? I mean, I know you're looking at sort of taking a historical run rate and applying it, but what about the work that's been done on with projections, with enrollment projections? Where does that come into play?
Well, it hasn't in this part right here.
Okay, so you're taking a historical run rate and just kind of applying it on a going
Yes.
forward. Okay.
Yes.
And I'm about due to get the new information from Bill Smith. Bill Smith was the one who,
Yeah.
you met with, and so I'm gonna get I should have it any moment, actually, on, he updates his model and then gives us kind of the past historical and then look to the forward in kindergarten, et cetera. So I'm about to have that.
And I guess the other piece to that, I mean, you can't predict a lot of this or forecast it with a level of accuracy even within the time period you're talking about, but we also know the city is investing in more dense housing too. So are we looking at the targeted population from that standpoint?
Yeah. Yeah, again, part of that has been with conversations with Bill around, some of the known development, and he does apply, some expected growth model information into his model.
Okay.
And so then he comes up with, numbers of children per household. But that's also connected to live births. So it's, it's pretty in-depth about how he goes about it. But, I mean, the bottom line is more houses, I do believe, will represent, increased numbers of students. And we know, like, the O'Brien development is likely to have, I think, a build-out of 600 new homes. So likely to have a direct correlation.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would say that most of this is historical. The base education amount was kind of, once again, has been going up at 2.3% a year, if you even taking that the years it was held constant. That's a decision that the legislature is going to make. And the common level of appraisal is really important to our tax rate because it either discounts or puts a premium on our grand list. And I have to say that working with Todd LeBlanc, our city assessor, he's very accurate. He's saying that our common level appraisal will probably go up a little bit in 2015. That's one of those numbers we'll know between December 15th and the first of the year. Because our grand list is starting to rise slightly. They're holding increased slightly, but the common level of appraisal is an average over a couple years, so it's not doesn't directly correlate every time. And then a last thing to be careful of here is this excess spending threshold, which as you see, if we've been financing our facility needs from the operating budget for a number of years, we've been able to do that. But as our needs grow, we won't be able to do that, because if we spend more than this threshold, then every dollar we collect above, we have to collect $2 and send one directly to the state and one stays for us to. That's what the penalty box is. So.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry to go back, to backtrack.
Yeah.
The CLA you said was going down at the state level?
Well, the appraisals, the total grand list is going down.
Grand list is going
Yes.
down, which doesn't that mean the CLA is going down?
The CLA goes up typically,
Right.
because we are comparing it to our last, let's just look at South Burlington. The CLA compares the total assessment of our properties against the last, current value against the last general appraisal.
Right.
Which was, and so when property values go down after they've already risen, then the common level appraisal goes up.
Yeah, didn't you just say that the CLA will probably go up a little bit in South Burlington in 2015?
Yes, because
the grand list is beginning to rise slowly?
well, it's beginning to rise now, but it takes into account losses in the past few years. So it's a
3-year rolling.
It's a rolling average. So that's why I say it doesn't
Okay.
correlate directly.
So
I probably got my terms mixed
No,
up.
I'm-
Is your- yeah, I'm trying to differentiate a state trend from a South Burlington trend. Are those, is the same thing happening, or is it?
No, we're a little bit, our values are rising overall now.
Okay.
During the recession, the height of the recession, our higher end properties weren't appreciating, and actually were depreciating a little bit, but our lower or average houses were holding their own.
But when they're selling above, then the CLA is dropping,
Yes, when they,
right?
yes,
So,
yeah.
Thanks, sorry to backtrack on
Oh, that's
that.
okay. So this excess spending threshold is going to be on the table again for the legislators this year. And it's, the number itself, you know, we just saw that last year we spent $14,500 per kid. The limit for this year has been calculated at $16,167. And so we always have to keep an eye on that. Anything that David wants to propose, that should be a first question. And we know what the answer should be, so. And Dan told me this months ago, but I checked on it. Vermont Yankee has an effect on the general fund of the state. It doesn't directly affect education taxes, but the closing of Vermont Yankees will affect the revenues of the state. So that's just another thing that.
But it's money mostly that went into the general fund contribution to the ed fund.
Yeah, so those are those factors, and we'll keep an eye on those as time goes by. Our next is tuition and school choice revenues has been 3.9% of our revenue, our local revenue, and I've analyzed this on page 3. The one thing we've checked in with our principal here at the high school and the guidance director, and we have a pretty favorable rate of people attending, students coming here from Georgia. And we expect that to continue. Their 8th grade class is high. So that's good news. There's some good news there.
Are we in competition with that with anybody?
Oh, yes, St. Albans. Yeah.
So when will we know the real number?
Well,
Could be 0 in that class, right?
I don't think so, because 2 years ago, we had 35% of their kids come here. And this is anecdotal maybe, but Tim Wow was talking to me, and they got a call from Georgia that said, hey, come, we're having a career night or a night for our 8th graders. come on up, you know, so they're calling us. So it's a good sign.
Being inquired about a lot.
Yeah.
You don't really we don't know 100%. That's, I think, to Dan's point, is until the first day of school, you know,
Yeah.
we really don't know. I mean, there's options for kids in that particular community who can say, oh, I changed my mind.
I just don't want us to become complacent at all, because this is getting to be too important a part of the overall deal.
Yep.
And the guidance has a special, Debbie Beretta, forget her title, but she takes care of the needs of kids from other districts, you know, looks out for them in particular.
Provides the district back information about how the students are doing, making sure their travels, making sure the transitions, doing open houses, doing the meetings at the schools.
Yeah, that's been a good connection there. It depends every year. The next point is excess tuition for special ed kids who have IEPs, and we keep a good eye on those costs. And then finally, school choice. And I thought, rather than explain it too much, I'd just show you the progression of how that's being phased out. If a student here is in the 10th grade now, we expect them to be in grade 12 in 2 years and still be contributing revenue to the district, but this is how it phases out.
And it's gone in 17?
Yes.
Currently that's as a result of the legislative change.
Rules, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, there's a note down there. We have 7 kids who aren't paying tuition, and we talked about those this summer at the board meeting. And then the others are the effects of sequestration are big on federal funds. And Bill Talbot, the Commissioner of Agency of Ed, is at a 6% decrease this year, and I just kind of carried that forward. We have this debt at the federal level, and there's not a whole lot of long-term planning done there, so that's why it's probably the only number we could come up with. Special education funding has held pretty constant at 48% of total costs. There are other categories of state-placed kids and all that kind of thing, but as our special ed costs go up, our reimbursement kind of stays steady. So that's what's going to be projected there. And then finally, we can receive up to 50% of transportation costs for eligible, getting kids to school, that kind of thing. But it's never really reached that limit, and 48% has been as high as it's been. So that's what we take into account, that 48% of our transportation costs will get reimbursed by the state. And we had some pretty big increases over the last few years. It was increasing 12%, but I don't see that going forward. We, for people who are on, well, it'd be Elizabeth probably, but we started our capital, our facility and capital plan where we had buses, and we bought 6 buses one year and hired our mechanic, and that all made this total cost go up and the reimbursement go up. So that's tailing off right now. And then finally, there's other funds, our interest, our E-rate on telephones, our payment received from the city of South Burlington, some stuff we do for other districts, carryovers, and that's 1.2% of the budget, 1.1. So finally, on page 5 and 6, the first few columns, it goes from fiscal 12 to 20. So 12's actuals in here, 13's budget's there for now, and I need to change that to actuals. Our 14 budget is there, and our 15 projection is there. This 15 projection is new. We did an update back in September. The numbers have changed a little bit based on information we have. Some of these numbers are going to change this month because our special ed service plans are being evaluated by the state. And then the state gives us an estimate by December 15th of what our reimbursements will be. So this is still a changing number. And then you can kind of see out to 20 the trends. And I'll just go through a couple. The IDEA is a federal fund subject to sequestration and 6% reduction. So from what you see in 15, 16 is down 6%, and so forth. And that could always be adjusted when we get new information, but it's a way to look to see how we're doing. If you go to the second page.
John, on that one, how do we respond to a 6% reduction of a federal program?
Well, I think Stewart has had to do that with the titles last year, and we've had less professional development for teachers.
That's one aspect. The other piece is that we're looking at a different way to do our summer school, which has been a big piece of, we'll probably just do a middle school, summer school, and we're looking at schools out to, run a program for our elementary kids so that we can cut expenses so that we have the money to do other things. Eventually, if it continues, there are positions that are paid through title funds that will be impacted, and certainly districts that have much larger percentages than we do and many more staff. We have, I think, 2.5, 3 staff that we pay with title funds have already cut, those positions in many, districts. Because
so right now it's less sort of at an individual service level, but more at a program, like a summer.
Right now, yes.
Okay.
But again, as the trend continues, those are the things we'll have to evaluate each year.
Okay.
I think it's similar with the IDEA. There's some services that Joanne Godek contracts out that she can't.
Should be limited.
Yeah. Okay, so then on the final page.
John, can I just ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
I see that the federal funds are declining significantly over this time period.
Yes.
On the other hand, the state funds are rising. Is that really a realistic thing?
We have not gotten any indication, and we've asked about, mostly from special education, about any cuts. Our funds here are also, the projections are tied to total costs. So those costs we figure are rising. They've historically risen a little bit faster than inflation. So that's one reason we show.
I just know the state is, at least the information that's publicly available says that they're running a locomotive off a track here soon, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know that is a question to keep looking at.
The money's coming in at a slower pace, and the money wants to go out at a faster pace, and these two things can't happen simultaneously.
Right. Yep, it's something I thought about too.
So these are based basically on the best information on historic trends and
that's right.
What advice you've been able to get.
And so on page 6, what you see there is the total, and these are the local funds plus the tuition. I'll just talk about that a little bit. This is very conservative for the tuition. So from districts with no high school, I am not projecting huge increases here because you don't know. It's the day of school in some cases. I'm going to Colchester, I'm going to South Burlington. That's maybe a little dramatic, but our tuition, our allowable tuition, or announced tuition, is allowed to, it goes up. So all I did was here is just add 1% for the districts with no high school increase to be real conservative, but I think we'll maintain our base.
And kept the population to about the same.
Yes. In the school choice, you can see those numbers agree. They do. The 2010's a little higher than, we budget a little higher than what we're going to get. That's the only place it disagrees. And then excess tuition, you don't know with your mix of kids. That number's been since I've been here, as high as $200,000. So it's just a placeholder. When you have a tuition-paying student pays the announced rate, but then services over and above that because of due to IPs are billable to the other district.
Yeah, thanks. Is there a plan, do you have a plan about school choice? I just, we continue to, looking at this is
Cut off.
frustrating because there continues to be people that want to come to school here, and it's a conversation out in the community on a regular basis. And one of the questions that I'm frequently asked is, so what are you guys doing about this? It seems like a disservice to students that.
Right. So, again, I mean, I think this can be a conversation with our legislators again. I mean, I think we put a fair amount of energy into it last time, maybe not enough. We can resurface that. I think we should. I think there's also an opportunity to engage in some one-on-one conversations with some of our sending districts that are interested. And again, part of the requirement requires us to have an agreement. And it may be that some of them would be willing to have a financial agreement where students could go from here to there or vice versa. And it may, it may be again at a rate that, we can certainly discuss and negotiate a little bit. So, I mean, I think there's two things. That one option, to explore those. But more importantly, I think when you look at opportunities for all kids, I mean, we really need to explore this Vermont-wide, and resources need to follow students.
Right.
So it's on our radar. It will be. I think it's an important conversation to have.
And can you just, sorry, I'm having a mental lapse about the students that we agreed could come here without paying tuition. And my recollection is that we made 2 exceptions, but there's 7 here.
Yeah, I went back to the board meeting minutes. There was some big picture choices.
So that was 5 big pictures.
Yeah, and then we had some others that, we have some other liabilities that, individuals that would come along too. So those aren't actually factored in there, but, there are some things where we're trying to be really mindful about families who made a commitment under the previous and how they would do. So the 7 is a resulting.
It was one student was over our limit of 27. So there's 1, and then there were 2 kids who had relatives here already, I believe, and then it's the July 10th meeting.
One of the things we were clear about is that a student under the old was here, and so there was some exposure on the grandfathering of that. And so what would be our exposure if your first child came here under the previous and you had 1 other? So that was part of that.
This is a projection?
That's current, right?
This is current year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you see just how that depletes. I mean, that again is the purpose of the information of showing that bottoming out essentially.
All right.
Just to be complete on that, we're dealing with a 1-year commitment right now, or how much of this carries forward?
I think it's more, some of are more than 1-year commitment of those 7, right?
That's correct. Until they,
But
age out or leave.
It grandfather, it sunsets with.
That's
with
right.
the current
Yep.
approval, it sunsets.
Right.
I wonder if there are more siblings
I
behind those
think, I
7.
remember that they looked.
Okay.
We already did the exposure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't that loud.
Okay.
Okay, look, I'd like to make a few comments. First of all, I want to commend both of you, especially you, John, for doing a very difficult task. I mean, I think it's really important to get an idea where these things are headed, so we can begin to think about what needs to get done. And I would hope nobody would take any of the future numbers as gospel. They would just take them as, I mean, you got them here to some pretty good precision, but, the accuracy should not be reflected in the precision, and I think you understand what I'm saying. But the piece that we don't have yet is the projection on the expense side. And one of my big worries is that we're building a big, what's sometimes called by planners an alligator jaw, where the alligator's mouth is opening up, and the expenses are running away from us relative to what we can reasonably expect for revenues. So, I would encourage you to try to find a way to get at that too. But at this point, kudos to you. I mean, it really, it's come a long way from where I've seen it in the past. Now, I don't like all the numbers, but
So it'd be good, I think, to move on to the stewardship information. And then we have that one single that goes along with it. And maybe, John, you can just walk through that. I mean, I think a lot of you are familiar with some of the facility stuff, but I think it's important for you to walk through that as well. John?
Well, I'm sorry about the volume of information, but I know some people have heard about the facility plan and never really seen anything but 1 year, because it's hard to communicate it all. So that's one reason for the sheets that are bigger. The point, I think a main point of this is we have more needs than can be funded in the operating budget. We've been pretty fortunate to be able to do that in the last 4 or 5 years. Sometimes we have grants that help fund buses or the contributions out at the athletic fields. So there's been other revenues, but we haven't had to do any long-term bond borrowing for anything that has useful life of 20 years for any of our paving or that kind of thing. But we saw the need for ADA accessibility a couple of years ago. There are students here that need to get to all the floors, and everybody here knows about the situation at the middle school last year when our elevator went out and was a long-term fix. And so we put money in last year's budget. It was approved, and we got an accessibility audit for ADA for the inside of the high school and the middle school. And we had done that similarly with all the outside areas at all schools 5 years ago, and that resulted in our paving of the front of the high school and the middle school, where we had some pretty big issues, especially at the middle school. And by the time when students when wheelchairs or whatever, that was all fixed. And drainage problems and all that goes with it. We just have received the preliminary results on this ADA accessibility audit, and we don't have a report to give you, but I have 17 pages of things that would need to be corrected. And I want to emphasize that it's not...
Is that one per page?
No.
Unfortunately.
No.
17's a lot.
Yes, between 2 schools, it's not just 1 school. And Tim Duff may even come here to address it, or we'll get his report on that. But we don't have to do all the requirements today. But if we upgrade a bathroom, which we need to do in the high school, then the ADA requirements kick in, and we have to do it according to those requirements. If we fix the elevator, then we have to do it right. And so that's the point. So I don't have a total dollar number on this yet, but we do know that there's some things that the restrooms at the high school have been on our radar for a couple of years, and that's something that we want to attack.
So those 88 things are not in here at all at this point?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to emphasize the genesis of how we got going on the ADA and why it's last year barely a whimper, now it's a big issue. You know, that's the reason. The second thing, and I'm not sure the order of magnitude on page 2, is our auto logic, all the computer and the mechanism that controls all our ventilation and heating was all updated in the mid-90s with the bond issue at all schools. And our HVAC guy, Leon, you know, is pretty good at this stuff, and he got us an estimate on what it would take to update that again in an existing building, and the price tag is $600,000. Now I don't know. We need to do more work on this just to see what the need is and how critical it is to have it done this year or 5 years from now. But I thought it was important enough we thought it was important enough to mention it.
We didn't mean to skip. I mean, the auditorium obviously is along with the
and the
ADA thing, and obviously those of you who have been in it.
So in this context, and maybe this is a little off topic, but we had this Education 2.0.
Oh, calendar 2.
Calendar 2.0,
Yeah.
whatever thing called. Does this comprehend that, or is that, I mean, part of the problem, one of the issues there, and a lot of issues, but one of the issues was you could be operating during a period of time when the comfort level wasn't the greatest, right? So those implications are not here at all, is that right?
This is essentially,
Okay.
status quo on calendar, start of year, end of year.
Yeah, I think that's where it should be right
Yeah.
now. I just wanted to make sure
Yep.
it was.
Just back to David's, the auditorium, there's no way for a student who has some needs to get around. There's no ramp from the stage to the seating area, and that's a requirement now. There's a requirement to have 6 accessible seats based on the size of our auditorium, scattered not just in one row in front, but to be placed strategically, I guess, around the auditorium.
As a requirement, can we access federal funds for that? Any of that?
I don't know the answer to that. We could. I mean, we could investigate that. I don't know.
I mean, this is all part of, again, just the identification of how we become compliant. And, I mean, part of that is, rationale, obviously, around, obviously you don't put them all in the front row. It's, there's a variety of reasons why, rightful reasons to be done. And so we have to be really mindful of those.
So,
Can I ask a question back on the elevator?
yes.
It feels like we've got 53,000 into this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're identifying another 14.6,
That's right.
and even after that, it's out of ADA compliance.
Yes.
I look at that, and is that cost we should have been looking at bringing it into compliance in aggregate before we invested this?
I'll let David answer.
I think the short answer, yes. The long answer is.
That was the wrong answer.
I know. But the right solution. I mean, we had to do it. We had a need, the infrastructure. We had to do it. The alternative right now, and the right alternative, is really to make one ADA compliant, and is, to all the right specifications. And at the middle school, I think we have to allow this to be studied, but it's an outside, elevator shaft that gets, somewhere on the outside of the building, and not reconfigured inside. Here at the high school, we have a far more complicated arrangement with all kinds of differing floors. We have an elevator that isn't ADA compliant, and so it really is looking at how do you redo something inside. You got to have a bigger shaft and a bigger space to have bigger openings. It's far more complicated, particularly here. So, I mean, part of that is we need to have actually redundancy going on as well. I mean, that's part of, again, a major area that when one goes down or is being, needing to be serviced, shouldn't be at the time of need, most likely, or there's a problem, we should have some redundancy. These schools were not built with, that in mind. The middle school, for instance, one elevator, right? And so we're looking at other alternatives of other lifts, but if they're not then ADA compliant, I don't want to spend any more money on that if it's not going to be compliant.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to have redundancy, and we need to have ADA. And, at this point, you know, it's something that we really need some, you know, outside assistance on with how to figure this out. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, John, but.
Oh, I'd say it was money well spent. We
Yeah.
had programs that had to move downstairs, and if we had an emergency, the only way to get our students down, or anybody who had a leg injury, whatever, is to carry them down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah, it's problematic, and I think that's where at least some are coming
my
from.
question's really coming from a place of, I mean, it's not often that we have a significant maintenance issue like we had with the middle school elevator, but when we look at those, you know, and I know everybody does this, but we really have to challenge ourselves on what are phases 2 and 3 that we might anticipate, so that initial investment addresses longer term issues. And you know, I know we had an immediate need, so I understand that. It does feel like a redundant investment, but yeah. Okay.
Okay, John, you want to just walk them through the rest of the info here?
Well, this is what we do. What we've done the last few years is, under David's direction, we get information from our facility people about, first of all, what's in the plan, and then is this still needed, or has there been cost adjustments, or any number of factors, and then what else is out there that may or may not be significant. So on page 3, you see there's a number of issues in the high school, and then on the right side you see I just wrote plan. Yes, that was something we were thinking about doing. It was in the long range plan. Or no, if it doesn't say that, it's a need that's come up recently. And these won't all be funded. They're won't even be requested. We have this items considered, and then David will go through with us and say, well, this is something we, you know, before you guys even see it, before the board sees it. But there are interesting things on here. The varsity baseball right field. We've had the field there for many, many years, but now there are condominiums and houses there, and foul balls are go in their yards, and they have little kids, and we've addressed it by moving our backstop and putting a fence above the backstop and putting a net up, but it still happens. We've stopped all use of the field except for the varsity baseball team, and we still haven't solved the problem. So this is what one solution to the problem would be. The other solution would be to close the field and move to Dorset Park. So that's why that's there. It's the very first item. And I don't know if it's going to survive the cut, but it's something we're considering. We have to, because it's a liability issue.
I mean, these are things we have to say, you know, for that one instance, you know, if we do that, you know, does it reduce the risk to zero? If not, is it a good use of money, right? And so those are some of the conversations that will be more embedded. But again, this reflects kind of the requests.
And do you have a total for in plan versus not of that 1.9 million?
There's on the back page, this bigger sheet, there's a total for in plan. It's probably on page 10 under fiscal 15.
Well, is plan all 50? Oh, it is, but 15 items. Okay.
So, John,
the plan is developed. I won't say evolved, but developed. When I was first asked to do this, it was boilers, buses, and roofs, and that was all supposed to be in the plan. And then
you're gonna throw me under the bus?
I didn't give any names. And as we started doing it, oh, this is ridiculous. There's a lot of things that are really high dollar that need to be monitored. The HVAC, the windows, even computers, although computers are separate. We have a little sheet there for that. But
so just order of magnitude, John, you've got for 2015, you've got 642 in.
Yes.
So that's what was in the plan.
Yes.
And so that's of the 1.9 million. So about a third is what was in
Well,
the plan.
the only thing I would say, Elizabeth, is on, yes, that's one way of looking at it. That is the way to look at it, except for on page 4, the IT
Yeah.
isn't in the plan, and it has its own, it's separate, so
Oh.
I'd take that 750 out of the 1.9, and so it's about half.
Okay,
Yes.
but it is twice what our last year's.
It is.
Investment
We
was.
cut last year, we deferred a roof, I think, or,
Right.
yeah, we definitely deferred some to keep our tax rate down, and,
Yeah.
This list is made up of your first go-around meetings with the administrators, is that true?
administrators and mostly in facility, yeah.
And so, in terms of priority level, are there things on here that can wait?
We haven't, again, as John said, this has not been vetted.
There's no
to a
priorities.
priority, and
Okay.
We're giving you just kind of the methodology or thinking. I think it's good that you see these, but you may not see them again,
Well, they're
Okay.
gonna be on the list, because, and then we're gonna see, you'll see the administration recommendation, and then go from there.
So
So-
I'm assuming this is a list that has been at least screened for, we've identified, this is not a wish list.
No, not at
These are
all,
things that are gonna have to get done
At some
eventually.
point.
Yes.
But,
Or be addressed, or an issue addressed, Like,
So are there nice flashy things on here that the South Burlington School Foundation can grab onto and
How about a capital campaign?
come back, if they're put back together? Like the turf field, it seems like, should there be a capital campaign for that? I mean, that's what led to the field to begin with.
Or the redoing of the track?
Or it's things like that. I mean, is there a reason to get the South Burlington's, the school foundation back together? And
I think that's one of the reasons these are on here, to get that dialogue going, because when the track's worn out, it's not like we can pull it up and say, let's play on the stones that are underneath it. So it's a definite need for the district.
right, but it's also it's a need that, I mean, could be justified in having a campaign through the foundation of
Absolutely.
raising the money.
Yeah,
for,
this is just to
for
show that the need's there. How we get to it might not be through taxes, it might be.
I mean, they're not going to want to put roofs on or
Right.
Is it
paving or
right.
parking lot, but if it has anything to do with facilities like sports facilities, there could be a movement towards doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Is
I
that
mean,
worth
I-
looking into? And
I guess I would put the baseball field issue in that same category.
Yeah, I was looking at that as well. I mean, it's.
To answer your question a little bit more, the stewardship facility maintenance isn't a lot of flash. It's
Right.
taking care of the buildings we have. So
No, I
it's,
understand, but
Yeah.
if there are
There
other
are a couple
things that
buckets like that.
there can be assistance.
yeah.
So,
And we've talked about this as far as maybe the foundation, and you're aware of the playground at Central, that there's a lot of fundraising and grants and that kind of thing. It can happen if somebody has the will to do it,
Right.
Yeah.
I guess the other question, this is a bigger question I had, and it kind of goes a little bit to what Dan mentioned, the lack of expenses and such. And maybe we're gonna see this when we see more of the 2020 plan, but I know you're talking about with different schools and different people about moving 5th grade to the middle school. And I look at down the road, I mean, are we gonna need 3 elementary schools by 2020? And if we don't, is that a source of decreasing the expenses and possibly increasing revenue as far as, leasing or whatever the property? I mean, presumably, and I don't want to cause any controversy, but I mean, presumably Chamberlain, but because we have a downward enrollment trend at Chamberlain, just looking realistically, that may, be a school that is not going to be here by the time your 2020 plan ends. Will that be factored in, or shouldn't that be factored in the next step? And there's.
Yeah.
And on the same hand, you could say that with City Center, maybe Central School shouldn't be either. You know what I mean? I hate to single out one of the schools at this point.
Well, no, I mean, Sure, I mean, it's the administration's suggestion of however that works, but as far as central school, and city center's not gonna really be that developed by 2020. I mean, it's a 10 to 20 year kind of thought process, or at least that's what I'm hearing. And actually with city center, but that does bring up another part. There is planned that there's going to be a road through part of the central school property. It's called, I think they're going to name it Garden Street. And there's a bit of property there that the school owns. I mean, is that property that can be used to generate resources? So I'm just, are there decent things that should be factored in there as possibilities for revenue stream or less expenses over the next 5 years?
So a lot of these is definitely tied to the master planning and visioning. And when we did it 8 years ago, there's even some dialogue about that as options. And so, although, and in my travels with fifth grade conversation with staff, I think it's important that I'm really open and honest. I mean, 20 years is a long time, but 20 years and 100 years is a blip, and we need to be really mindful about the future for South Burlington and not have missteps or not put, abundant amount of resources in places that may be in question. And so I do want to let the master planning and visioning work happen, and options and community, have the opportunity to weigh in. But we have a lot of these things happening around us that are going to start to influence our decision around that, Market Street and City Center and the airport. And then, we've got 3 schools with slightly downward trending enrollment. What are the options? And looking at the overall cost for us to continue to provide, a good education is going to be at the heart of it. So, that's exactly what we want to try to get at with the master plan, and to start to call out some of those very specific things.
Yeah, and I also bring it up now because if even just to stay where we are now, we have to go and ask for a 5 or 6% increase in taxes, having some message that we are thinking longer term. This is not going to just keep going this way. We have ways where we're going to be reducing expenses and perhaps generating some revenue, even if it's one time, but it can be put towards facilities. And that would be a nice to be able to add to the message when we say, oh, we want 5-6% increase in taxes. But look at all the good things we're doing to make sure this doesn't happen again and again.
This is definitely one of the positive opportunities in our closer collaboration with the city is looking at, our expectations and needs and wants and desires out. And so almost as you see in the stewardship plan is to get that funding understanding on their capital improvement plan at the city, and to start to be able to have a conversation about if you do that in 2017 and we're doing this, I mean, based on, again, what John has provided as a general observation, we can't do that. And that's just 1 year. We need to get ourselves coordinated, and not only from the perspective of the incurred cost to the taxpayers, but also what kind of facilities, what kind of decisions are we wanting to have that make sense. And so I think Martin's right, and it comes right back to the point where people can, we're trying to be mindful. This is how we came to the stewardship plan, where we're able to predict with level of clarity, on where we are and where we're headed. And that, I think, is a desired state. So, anything?
Just one thing we kind of skipped over is on page 5 and 6 it's no detail at all except numbers as far as our technology for students and teachers, history and projection. On page 5, it shows all grade levels, and column 1 is 1-to-1, and grades K through 5, grade 6, which is its own. We haven't expended, most of the computers are gone from grade 6 because we've gone to 1-to-1 at the middle school, grade 7 and 8, and all the labs those computers have become obsolete and the labs are going away, so there's an investment required there. So I just wanted to see the trend as far as, okay, where have we gone with the one-to-one program? It'll be fully implemented from grades 7 to 12 next year. And then after that, it's just the cost of maintaining those 6 years of computers, whatever they are. We could go to different models and all that kind of thing, but it's a projection of continuing that.
About your projection, I mean, that isn't generally costs of computing going down, and we have an upward, you have a cost going up. I thought that generally speaking, costs for buying computers keeps on a downward slope.
Well, we have many more computers than we ever had. We went from.
I know, but like from
It's the same lease costs.
2016 on to 2020, there's an increase every year as opposed to flat or going down.
We won't be
Well-
increasing the actual number of computers over those years.
It's
is what you're
presumably
I
the
see what you're
computers will
saying.
be cheaper. The computers
Well,
will be cheaper.
I'll tell you what though, if we lease the one-to-ones, we buy everything else. If we continue to lease one-to-ones, leases have been at historic lows many years now at 3%. I think we did 2.9 this last year.
Okay.
I
So
put it in
it's
at
the
5.5%.
financing part of it is what
Versus
you're
the
talking.
outright
Gotcha.
purchase.
Okay.
Yeah.
Versus the
And
cost of
are you,
computers.
do you account for the next, so their lifespan is 4 years, is that
Yes.
correct? And so do you account for, we're gonna be going into our first demise of laptops, so to
Yeah.
speak, right?
Well, yes, and go to page 6, I'll show you that.
Okay.
Page 6 says, the top of page 6, it just shows, hey, this is what we've committed to so far. In 2012 was our first batch, grades 8 and 9. And their 4-year life as far as the lease goes, so they'll last us to 2015. And so if you just take that column down to the next box, in 2016, we'll replace those with new ones, and that's what the cost could be. Now, I haven't taken into account, okay, let's see, of these 300 computers we bought, 200 can keep going on. I haven't taken that into account. This is.
And is that something we'll take into account?
expiring leases, though, in this.
Yes,
Yeah.
the top is the leases that expire, yes.
This essentially assumes that when the lease is over, the computer gets replaced through a new lease.
Yes, that's
Right.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're looking at all those things, Martin, and one of the things that's becoming more and more aware, like, for example, I'm just going to use, not that we're buying iPads, but because the iPad Air came out, you can buy iPad 2s new in the box for $100 less. And this year, as we look at the lease, we're going to look at, is last year's model, the exact one we bought, which might be not an $800 computer, but a $600 computer, new in the box, what we want to do for a 4-year lease, because they're now sufficient. So we are going to be looking at those kind of pieces. So these projections, are so that they're realistic, but our goal is to drive those costs down, and we're looking at that very seriously.
I think actually, not to overstate it, but the grade 11 lease that we just did, we had projected $58,000, and the lease was lower rate, and we didn't need as many computers, so the actual cost was $49,000. So that's how we operate. We're not going to try to spend just because it's in the budget.
So John.
I try to hide that number.
I mean, I think
We're not the federal government, no.
Right.
So I'm trying to be mindful of time. I think people are getting number saturated. The stewardship plan, I think people understand, the concept, and this is referred to as the plan. I would like, John, maybe just to go over this cover sheet a little bit, at least the bottom half of it with them, and
Right.
some of our thinking.
With computers, never would we bond those because their life is not long enough. But for replacing an elevator or a roof, they have a useful life of 10, 15, 20 years, an elevator longer. So we know that if I put 600,000 or 1.9 million in the chart that shows our taxes, our cost per pupil would be way above the limit, and we can't afford all this through the operating budget. So we have to be thinking of alternatives, and one way is just a bond. Take information, make sure everybody knows what the issue is, kind of get expert opinions on what should the real cost to be, you know, take it for bid or a request for information, and then talk at the board level, this is what we think needs to happen, and put a proposal together for a new bond. That's one way of doing this, because our needs are kind of stockpiling. The second way to do this, and I've been encouraged by the bond bank, with the bond that is sitting in the 2006 bond, there's still $2 million sitting there, and it earns interest. We invested it in government strips that earn the interest, so that when the payment comes, taxpayers don't have to pay it. It just comes from the proceeds. But if we went to the voters and said, look, this money, $1.5 million, we would like to use this for fixing an elevator or the turf
Some
field,
of the denoted items, yeah.
you know, a number of items, and they say yes, then we know what the increase in the taxes would be, because we know what the payment is. Right now it's about $200,000 a year, and it would go down every year by $10,000. But that's another thing we could do if we absolutely need to bond for some of these things. Another issue that David has talked about a lot and is setting up a capital reserve fund. It's a little hard right now because of the, you know, if you put aside a penny, $225,000, that's a good planning mechanism. It's legal. We could go to the voters and say we want to put a penny aside every year for these ongoing needs. So that's an option. It doesn't help us when we have things staring us in the face, but long term that would probably be a good thing to do. I know that Colchester has done that successfully, even, you know, and they have a reputation of not passing budgets, but the reserve fund has helped them fund some roof repairs and that kind of thing. And Essex High School does the same thing, Chittenden Central.
John, can you explain to me again why we can't use any of the bond that we have now for some of these projects?
It has to do with what we convey to the voters, how we're going to use it. It was to be used for two purposes. One, to build an administration building that had some special ed capability in it, and also to upgrade the cafeteria here. And my understanding, and I wasn't here, but my understanding was that it was accompanied by state funding that didn't materialize in the amount that necessary to do the project. So we're stuck with the problem because we had this bond money that we are not using for the purpose intended. So the IRS says, look, you be careful of that bond. I'm talking, sorry.
Sorry, you're good.
I'm talking too much. There's arbitrage rules. We cannot invest in it to earn money. The only thing we can do is invest it to pay that back at a lower rate than what we pay to the bond holders. So, and we've proved that out. Our auditors, we've done that.
And they don't want you making money.
But the upshot of it is the voters have to vote on how it's deployed.
Yes, and it does tie in with how it was originally voted too. So we can't pay for the turf field with this.
Yeah.
Yes, but we could make building improvements and repairs, you know, that kind of thing.
So could we vote to have that bond fund become the capital fund? Or is that?
There's still the bond. If we did that, we'd have to spend it all in 3 years.
Well,
you have to spend. Let's just say if it was $1.5 million, we would have to spend a great percentage of it in 18 months.
Why is that?
Those are you're not allowed. a trick that some municipalities and school districts used to do, if they had deficit, to hide it would be to borrow bond money and let it sit for years and years and years.
Okay.
That's an old trick, it's long gone. So that's why you have to spend it
Are
in
there any
3
new
years.
tricks that we can use to get us out of the bind that we're in?
No, I listened to my bond management class yesterday, actually, so, but anyway.
So the money that's in the bond now, could a vote, could it go out to the voters? You know, this was earmarked for these things, but we would like to use it for these things.
That's right.
Of
Okay.
similar nature,
Of
could be
okay.
redeployed if they approved it, yeah.
Okay.
So it sounds like through the process, you may be coming back to the
Right.
board with some funding alternatives for some aspects of this, of what we're seeing in the budget as needs.
Yes, and I think some things might not get done with this process, because the process is 6 weeks left, because the ADA, to analyze the cost of the remediation would be, it takes some time, but yes.
So just to make sure I understand though, if we went to the voters on the bond and said, we want to redeploy this for these capital needs that we have.
Yes.
How does that then affect our budget in a positive way as far as for the property tax increase?
Well, it would help us get work done that needs to be done.
Right, and we wouldn't have to get the whole chunk of money in the budget, essentially.
That's
We would-
right.
We would just, the payment, it's just
gonna
in the
have to start paying
future,
it back
we'd have to
now.
start paying it off. So in
Right.
other words, it would be one mechanism to help us either keep the budget where it is right now, or maybe even lower it, or not have it go up as high
Yes,
otherwise.
and the advantage of using that money would be that the debt schedule is already set.
So we
there's
know
no
how much
guesswork.
it's gonna cost us for succeeding years.
That's right, that's right.
That seems like a
So anyway, we,
attractive thing, given what our situation is, but.
so this is a lot of information. It's number overload, but again, we provide you with some information, and you can, I'm sure we'll have additional questions. We're gonna continue to go to work. If you have other questions, certainly let us know, but we're gonna go to work and, try to then put forth a budget process here now, a next step around figuring it out. So,
Can we have an idea of, will we have expenses prior to our next meeting?
That's what yes, our goal is to have it next Friday.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I would just say, and as much advance notice as we can to sort of peruse it, I think will make the discussions a little more, we were
Engaged. I agree.
kind of going through this live, so.
I understand Dan's point, and yes, we should have expenses out to 2020. Given the recent settlement of the contract and the uncertainty of some of the health costs, I'm not quite sure. I've been telling him that for months, but I'm not quite sure we'll have that. But we would definitely have a 2015, because that's where we have to focus.
Unless there's other questions, we'll move on to agenda item number 11, sorry, ends policy.
So this is the first reading on the ends, and again, there's been a lot of discussion on this, and I asked Stuart just to kind of give you a little bit of an update. You probably already have read that. We can walk through some of this. Again, this is a first reading, doesn't require action, but I think, getting the feedback from you will be important. I don't want to rush this process, so if you're feeling a little overwhelmed and you want more time, that's certainly appropriate too. This isn't, again,
I think it can be a first reading, whether we have a lot of input tonight or not, which I don't tonight, but we'll promise by the second or third reading to have
Fine.
more.
so I don't know if there's any specific questions that any of you have, or what your pleasure would be.
Dennis, I think there was a discussion the last time about who, other than a couple of people in the administration and the board, has participated in getting it to this point. Are we gonna go through a series of readings before it goes to administrators?
No,
and-
it's already gone to administrators, Dan. I mean,
So this includes some
This
feedback
includes-
from them?
This document is feedback that includes all the building level and district administrators.
Okay,
That's what
so,
it includes.
so we're at the building level administrators, okay? Okay, great, that's great.
This past, well, it was yesterday.
Well,
Yesterday
did
morning, we did
actually-
another
Actually, I
review.
got even a couple more comments since this reading, which I'll bring in as we do second readings and stuff, especially around personal development. Pat Phillips and Alyssa McDonald had some late thoughts in terms of, if you look, there's still a little bit of redundancy, and they had some tightening of the language there, but pretty much otherwise.
Are we kind of
it's-
converging together on our?
Oh, yeah, yes, definitely.
Okay?
So what's the board pleasure? You want to go through this or just accept this
let's
as a first
comment,
reading? And
bring them into the second reading.
provide additional comments? Okay.
That's good.
Great.
Nice job, Stuart.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to setting the agenda for the December 18th meeting.
So, RFP. We want to not lose that. Let's make the note of that.
Put that on the superintendent's report.
Yep.
What is policy governance for administrative reports?
This was a review of the process. I mean, this is something that's in our report. It's a reoccurring report that we've done. I can't recall specifically the, you know.
One of you asked for.
Well, part of it is our agenda matching. No, but part of it is our,
Responsible. Oh, I may have.
Ask for that.
Why did we?
well, I think, I don't know exactly why we did that.
It was one of the requests during.
It was more of a review of our melded practice, I think. It was, you know, our modified version, how we're doing our work.
Is that gonna be in
I
our?
recall a discussion that said that we wanted to do something on policy governance, but we wanted to see the ends before we did that.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Yeah, it was just, it was kept on here as a placeholder.
Well, we also talked
Did I
about.
help your memory?
We also,
Agenda.
yeah, again, between us, we have one collective memory. We did talk about also setting our agendas to highlight where
Which-
policy governance fits with those, and that's something David and I had talked about doing when we set agendas, so we should just
Maybe we
continue to
could-
keep that in mind.
Mhm.
There
So we
there
can-
is a working group, the Harry Frank group, and the VSBA is running a working group on policy governance that David and I haven't been able to participate in because
Wednesday
it's
night.
typically Wednesday. There's not a webinar, but a teleconference. I'm wondering if we shouldn't follow up with that group and sort of see.
I asked them if they meet any other time.
Yeah.
Because it's, we have a conflict, and I haven't, he basically said that's the time we've committed, but
Okay.
I can follow back up with him. Maybe they can carve out some more time for us.
So we're taking policy governance off for this?
Yeah, I think it's fine. We, again,
Since we don't know what.
particularly, let us, you know, work on our ends and then
Yeah.
bring it back, so.
I think we have a lot with the 2015 budget.
I think we do too.
Yeah.
Do we have a, I'm sure we do have a meeting that's just budget.
Yeah, I mean,
It's scheduled already in January.
Yeah.
yeah, and so we may want additional ones, but I think, you know, we'll get to the 18th, and that may be our discussion as a result of our, you know, our information
Okay.
with the updated budget information we have, how we're gonna do that, so.
And can we add on future agenda items just the update on fundraising?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other changes on the 18th agenda? Sounds like we're good on that one?
Yep.
Okay. All right, anything else on future agenda items? I think we talked about that.
We get to take off the Tell Vermont 2013 survey since it's been
Actually,
scheduled.
yeah, we could take that off, and we'll
Yes,
just
yeah.
put it on the two, what did I say, 19 agenda? No,
217, I think you said?
219.
219 agenda.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. All right, any comments on the minutes of November 20th? Seeing none, by consensus, those minutes are approved. Any questions on the AP orders 21 and TP 74? Seeing none, we have a specific AP check to the Essex Communication or Community Education Center, and we've lost John. So do we have?
This was actually a question that was answered, I
Yep.
think, in your packet. Forget who asked that. So the explanation or the response, if there's additional, is in there.
And so that's something we have to sign off on, right?
Yep.
Yeah, this is in excess of the authorized orders of $50,000. So do I have a motion to approve the AP check to the Essex Community Education Center in the amount of $62,704? This is for students that are attending the Center for Technology in Essex from our district.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's approved. Announcements, David?
So, we already mentioned the 17th, although, we're trying to get that joint meeting together, although it sounds like there's gonna be issues with that, so I'll let you know on that. The Big Picture exhibition, is during the week of the 13th through the 20th, and if you're interested in coming, there'll be public displays of the work and students that are there. It ranges from, a fair amount of time throughout those days. If you're interested in the schedule, I can get that to you. On the December 6th, we have a variety of concerts, coming up. So right around the corner, chorus concerts, band concerts, etc. coming up. We have one winter concert is on Sunday, December 8th at 2 in the auditorium. We welcome you there to that. And also on the 6th, as I said, we have a chorus concert. The Chamber Singers will be hosting the amazing vocal ensemble Lionheart in conjunction with the UVM Lane series. It's going to be in the high school auditorium. And so again, you're welcome to come to those. We know this is a busy time of the year, but a lot of festive activities going on as well. So that's all I have.
Any other announcements? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, Dan, sorry.
Last meeting we had on the agenda that we were going to sign off on the teachers' contract stuff.
Yes.
And that didn't appear on this week's agenda?
Actually, it was on and we amended the agenda. I
Oh, did I
actually have
miss
a
that?
copy here, but we have not gotten the final
Okay.
comments
Must
from
have
the
been
SBA.
some spaghetti
Scheduling
coffee or
conflicts,
something.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yep, no
No,
problem,
that's
Dan.
fine. All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? We are adjourned.
We all